Here's the uncomfortable truth. Some viewers aren't defending Eva. They're defending the behavior. This narrative has become a museum of abandoned plot lines. The documentary Andre was supposedly making at the hospital evaporated without so much as a closing shot. The world-renowned photographer has apparently misplaced both camera and purpose. Naomi's professional life, after the harassment scandal, remains a convenient blank space. Jacob's casework has drifted into legend. The dirty cop thread was introduced with great seriousness and then quietly buried. Danny and Pamela's modeling agency keeps waiting for that first client to materialize. Smitty's investigation into Malone stalled in the exact place where stories go to die. And Ted continues living in a hotel as though permanence is an optional add-on. Meanwhile, the romantic chessboard begs for a reshuffle, because nothing says momentum like couples trapped in repetitive loops, yet the show insists on spotlighting Kat's selective standards as if inconsistency were a virtue. Forgiveness for Tomas sleeping with Eva arrives at record speed, but compromise with her father on anything involving Eva is treated like moral contamination. The audience reaction only adds to the spectacle, with certain defenders behaving as though two entirely different versions of the series are airing, one in which Eva's behavior is unassailable, and another in which her gaslighting of Laura over Leslie was plainly on display. Denying what was shown is a choice. Endorsing it is also a choice. Pretending it never happened is simply theatrical dishonesty, and it prolongs the debate that could end instantly if the appeal of a well-played villain were admitted without hypocrisy. Of course, the production leans hard into the struggle narrative, because audiences love a redemption arc. While overlooking the obvious, Kat represents the kind of privilege parents strive to provide, and both Kat and Eva suffer from attitude problems that would benefit from less self-righteousness and more self-awareness. Call the situation what it is. Vanessa, for instance, continues to perform the emotional discipline of someone experiencing her first boyfriend at 17, breathless, irrational, and exhausting. While Doug's absence is dragged out so long, it begins to sound like a detective has him hidden away for plot convenience. Kat is warned off questionable decisions, yet the surrounding cast behaves as though consequences are merely decorative. Even Hayley'S special tea whispers of a sinister toolkit, complete with pointed references to the same drop count used in Bill's last cup, because subtlety is clearly not the goal. Still, credit where it is due. Anita's blue pantsuit at Winterfest delivered polish the writing often withholds, and Kat's black and white striped look was striking, especially on Thursday and Friday, though even that style moment can't distract from basic confusion like what RB is supposed to signify. Then comes Lynette, introduced with all the clarity of a smokescreen, prompting suspicion that Hayley'S glare at Bill's office signals something larger: identity theft, framing, manufactured charges, and a conveniently timed plea for Bill's help. And as for Shanice and Ted, no. Nosy, untrustworthy, and conspicuously forgetful about setting Nicole up with the new doctor, Shanice plays the innocent while operating like a saboteur, an archetype that belongs paired with someone else entirely, preferably while being held at a safe distance from any storyline requiring sincerity. Bill heard everything, and the silence is the strategy. Bill's oblivious routine is not persuading anyone. The implication is that every word Hayley said on that phone with Randy was heard loud and clear, and the current posture is simply strategic silence until the safest next move presents itself. Meanwhile, Vanessa continues the impressive feat of treating an openly problematic man like a diamond in the rough, as though sheer insistence can convert Joey's criminal edge into a storybook romance. Grief for Doug may explain the desperation, but it does not excuse the refusal to absorb the very direct warning that those problems come standard with the package. Kat, for her part, is caught in the familiar soap opera trap of being told to heal on command, while her pain is repeatedly reintroduced like a recurring guest star. Bitterness is not flattering, but neither is the sanctimony of insisting she forfeit her feelings simply because other people are tired of seeing them. And then there is Tomas, an ego wearing a suit, whose devotion appears primarily directed at Tomas, using Kat as a rung on the ladder toward partnership and leveraging her Dupree proximity as if love were a networking event. The choice narrative is especially thin, given the assertion that he had both the job and Kat before Eva entered the picture, and that he stated plainly what he wanted, leaving Eva to discover, at the most theatrically inconvenient moment, that pregnancy can be the show's preferred punctuation. If Kat moves in with him, the writing practically drafts itself. The calm before the paternity storm, followed by Eva rescuing Kat from the situation she was walked into with both eyes open, thereby manufacturing a bond out of the rubble. On the romance front, Ted and Shanice sit on the edge of a storyline that feels less like chemistry and more like a crowded waiting room. Ted's indecision reads as a chronic condition, and the more prudent hope is that, if Nicole is truly in the rearview, Ted is eventually paired with someone not already entangled with half the cast. The suspicion that Shanice set Nicole up with a doctor specifically to clear her own path to Ted, while simultaneously provoking Lulu Leslie, is exactly the sort of petty, multitasking soap's reward, even when it is transparently self-serving. Speaking of unanswered questions, Detective Marcel's wife remains a conspicuous absence, precisely the kind of character who could walk on screen and resolve certain ongoing nuisances with a single look, particularly where Lulu Leslie is concerned. Jacob and Naomi continue their exhausting marital loop. Jacob is framed as loyal, attentive, and demonstrably affectionate, while Naomi remains seemingly committed to dissatisfaction as a lifestyle choice, prompting calls for the writers to provide Jacob a new interest and let Naomi carry her discontent elsewhere. Adding fuel, there is a suggestion Naomi may be battling feelings for Ashley, even as the couple cycles back into intimacy. Over in the scheming department, Bill's mysterious new client, already suspected of being connected to Hayley and her wider web, lands as yet another grifter-shaped twist, with Lynette's arrival and old embezzlement suspicions wrapping Hayley, Randy, and the newcomer into a convenient shared backstory. If Hayley is indeed intent on finishing the job in St. Bart's, subtlety is clearly not part of the itinerary. Even the background does heavy lifting. Bill speaking to Lynette while Caroline sits behind them, looking unusually sad, invites the obvious question: what exactly is being written in silence that will soon be screamed aloud? Not every rumor deserves oxygen, however. Vernon is not cheating. He is taking singing lessons, preparing a Winterfest surprise for Anita, then predictably panicking and backing out. An explanation so wholesome, it almost feels suspicious in a genre that prefers betrayal. Still, the holiday machine rolls on, with two specials slated for December 24th, 2025 and December 30th, 2025, featuring an original song tied to Vernon's portrayer and a guest appearance by Kenny Lattimore to serenade viewers into 2026. The community policing of discourse is equally explicit. No racism, no politics, no religion, no sexual orientation commentary, because nothing says peaceful fandom like a preemptive ban list. And for those craving realism, the loudest critique may be the simplest. If the story is set in the DMV heading into a cold holiday season, leaving a sliding door perpetually open behind a thin curtain is less wealthy and unbothered, and more thermostat sabotage, with the added bonus of pretending security concerns evaporated the moment Allison was locked up. This isn't a love story, it's a public training seminar on self-sabotage. Tomas is reenacting a familiar cautionary tale. The same predictable arc Derek once ran on Ashley, except this time the romantic motivation appears to be missing entirely. The destination is obvious. When Tomas inevitably does Kat dirty again, the only suspense will be whether Kat finally stops treating warning signs like decorative lighting, or leans fully into the true crime villain fantasy she seems so fond of admiring from a safe distance. And yet, the surrounding chorus keeps offering Kat the sort of advice that ruins lives efficiently. The push for her to move in with Tomas is delivered with all the seriousness of a casual wardrobe change, as though commitment is measured in closet space. A ring was mentioned once by Bill, the lone voice acknowledging that cohabitation without a formal commitment is not bold, it is simply convenient for the person with the least to lose. Kat's instincts are not sabotage, they are an overdue reality check. If the hesitation is rooted in the uncomfortable possibility that the attraction was partly fueled by competition with Eva, and that the moment Eva lost interest, so did the thrill, then the relationship is not romantic. It is reactive. The moral inconsistency does not help. Kat can forgive Tomas for sleeping with Eva at record speed, but cannot find an ounce of flexibility when her father is involved, and Eva enters the conversation. Hurt is understandable. Selective outrage is not. If betrayal can be filed under "we move forward," then family conflict does not get to masquerade as principle. It reads less like boundaries and more like convenient leverage. Meanwhile, the Eva-Leslie orbit continues to swallow oxygen in every room it enters. There is the distinct sense that Eva and Leslie are quietly commandeering Samantha's idea and project, as if other people's work is merely a communal buffet. Eva's loyalty dilemma is also handled with the subtlety of a siren. Yes, it is her mother, but enabling chaos because it comes with a family discount is still enabling chaos. Leslie, in particular, inspires a level of audience disgust that is not even attempting to be nuanced. The one charitable note is that Trish, as an actress, is evidently doing her job well, because provoking this degree of unified irritation is technically effective. Bill, for his part, is busy perfecting his Scrooge with a briefcase routine while dabbling in workplace moral policing that lands as quietly alarming. Dictating that Tomas must have a great committed relationship with Bill's niece to earn a promotion may be defensible in logic, but the vibe is unmistakably intrusive. Professional advancement should not require the boss's approval of private emotional labor. It is an HR complaint waiting for a printer. The Hayley situation, however, is where the show's appetite for melodrama becomes almost industrious. Bill's new client and Hayley allegedly share a past, and not the charming kind. The client is in trouble for embezzlement from a bank, money unnoticed until an audit did what audits always do: expose the confidence of people who think spreadsheets are optional. The implication is that Hayley and the client once ran a scam together, and only one paid the price. Now comes the tidy little escalation, Hayley dangling a big payday if the client kills Bill, only for the client to fall for Bill instead and potentially warn him. It is the sort of plot that dares the audience to pretend surprise while watching the pieces assemble themselves. Then there is Vanessa and Joey, a pairing engineered to showcase hypocrisy at scale. Vanessa presses aggressively into Joey's world while demanding he behave as if his world does not exist. She wants public visibility with a gangster, resents judgment from others, and yet manages to look at Eva and Leslie with open disdain, as though moral superiority is a renewable resource. The contradiction is glaring. Laundering money and operating as a madam apparently qualifies as legitimate enough, but other people's messy business triggers pearl-clutching. Even Nicole, with far more reason to be contemptuous, manages to show more restraint. The emotional timeline is equally questionable. Joey's point that Vanessa has not finished mourning her husband is not cruel. It is observable. Doug is barely gone, yet Vanessa is sprinting toward Joey with the urgency of someone trying to outrun grief rather than process it. The desperation peaks in her demands: commitment, public acknowledgement, even marriage talk, paired with the convenient relief that her children are away at school, freeing up more time to chase a man who is openly trying to contain the fallout. This is not romance, it is fixation with a soundtrack. The ditch metaphor does not feel hyperbolic, it feels like foreshadowing. As if that were not enough, there is also the strategic angle. Vanessa edging closer to Joey to take him down, convinced he is tied to what happened to Doug. If that suspicion is genuine, the choice to pursue intimacy as a tactic is either reckless or calculated in the most self-destructive way possible. And the irony reaches full bloom when Vanessa declares she would never cheat on Joey, when the relationship itself appears to have been born from infidelity. That is not devotion. That is selective memory dressed up as virtue. Elsewhere, the show continues its commitment to relational dysfunction as a lifestyle. Dana and Marcel read like a perfect couple made in hell, which is arguably the only honest branding in the entire ensemble. Ted and Shanice, surprisingly, remain kind and respectful to each other despite conflict and unresolved issues. An anomaly so rare it risks being mistaken for poor writing rather than emotional maturity. Then Ted goes and entertains Leslie and her mess anyway, because stability is never allowed to stand unchallenged for long. Danny and Andre at least deliver what the genre promises: fun chemistry and a sense of momentum. Of course, there is the lingering fear that Bill will be broken by the women around him, triggering Danny to don a superhero cape and leave Andre, at which point Andre will predictably run to Ashley, because some characters treat emotional loyalty like a temporary lease. Naomi and Jacob, unfortunately, are testing the audience's patience with grim efficiency. Naomi appears to have absorbed entirely too much influence from Ashley, and the marriage is drifting into that familiar space where one partner tries and the other merely occupies the role. Jacob is framed as a good husband, perhaps too good, while wearing a perpetual frown and quietly accumulating reasons to walk away. Naomi's behavior raises the obvious question: what exactly is the goal here? Jacob, the marriage, or simply the satisfaction of undermining both? Even basic responsibility gets reduced to dark humor, with concern over whether Naomi remembered her pill before sleeping with Jacob. Romance, evidently, is now a compliance checklist. The smaller mysteries continue to tease, a blood test that won't find anything because there's nothing to find, prompting the obvious suspicion that the bottle was never poisoned at all. Vernon's alleged singing lessons with Sharon, possibly a Christmas surprise for Anita, or possibly not, dangle as a rare thread that could land as sweet rather than cynical, assuming it does not get redirected into yet another needless twist. And looming ahead, the Carlton and Nicole development inspires dread, especially when Nicole has more promising chemistry elsewhere. While Carlton reads as a creep, the storyline insists on recycling. Even the act of watching becomes its own cautionary tale. One viewer's contemplation of pursuing a relationship in 2026 reportedly collapses after observing this parade of chaos, everyone tripping for one reason or the other, as if emotional regulation is a myth invented by people with boring lives. The series still has bright spots. June, notably, functions as a fresh breeze, the rare presence that refreshes rather than exhausts. But the broader pattern remains consistent. The show excels at portraying people making the worst possible decisions with unwavering confidence, then acting shocked when consequences arrive on schedule. Stop blaming the love triangles. The real reason this show feels empty is far more embarrassing. Vernon having an affair with Leslie is the kind of plot twist that should inspire outrage, at least in theory. In practice, the only truly offensive part is the timing. Leslie waiting 2 decades to arrive with a child and detonate a marriage is not restraint, it is poor scheduling. If the goal is to expose betrayal, then showing up the moment the baby is born is efficient, decisive, and dramatically honest. Waiting 20+ years turns the reveal into a dusty scrapbook confession, still disruptive, just less impressive. And yes, ruining a marriage is not the world's gravest sin when the marriage is already being undermined by infidelity. The sanctity ship sailed, circled the harbor, and sank. Meanwhile, while the narrative insists on spiraling into endless debate about Eva and Kat, an exercise in delusion masquerading as discourse, one practical truth deserves immediate recognition. Whoever has been handling Kat's makeup lately should be contractually obligated to stay. It is the rare upgrade this story has managed without turning it into a crisis. At this point, the cosmetics department is doing more character development than the writing. The larger problem is structural. This is less a suspenseful drama and more an American family argument stretched across episodes like Leftover Taffy. The show lingers, repeats, and stalls, then wonders why it fails to provoke that essential reaction of serialized television: urgency. Where is the nail-biting momentum, the edge-of-the-chair tension, the episode-ending cliffhanger that earns the next hour? The story wants to be addictive but keeps choosing adequate. Joey, however, remains an oasis of blunt clarity in a landscape of self-inflicted chaos, particularly when dealing with Vanessa. Watching him check her mess is not cruelty, it is basic narrative hygiene. Vanessa has become a masterclass in how to turn a relationship into a series of demands dressed up as emotions. First came the pressure to go public with an ambiguous arrangement that was never designed to survive daylight. Then came the insistence on commitment from a man telegraphing, repeatedly and unmistakably, that commitment is not on the menu. Every refusal is met with whining theatrics that belong in a toddler's playroom, not an adult romance. And hovering over it all is an unresolved grief she treats like an inconvenient chore. Doug's death deserves mourning, not avoidance, not weaponization, and certainly not replacement by a new obsession. The spiral intensifies when she effectively pushes Donald back to school so she can play the fantasy role of a gangster's wife alongside Joey. An identity makeover pursued with the confidence of someone who mistakes chaos for purpose. The predictable outcome is equally unromantic. Joey will eventually avoid her, cut her off, or both, not out of malice, but out of exhaustion. Kat's storyline, at least, attempts to aim for forward motion. Moving in with Tomas is the kind of decision that can either sharpen the stakes or expose how thin the foundation really is. The yes case is obvious: accelerate the relationship, force the characters to live inside their choices, and let the fallout arrive on schedule. And if the show needs an engine, the most efficient one is already waiting in the wings. Eva discovers she is pregnant by Tomas right after Kat settles in. It is manipulative, predictable, and effective. The holy trinity of soap propulsion. Nicole's romantic geometry adds another layer of strategic meddling. Shanice playing matchmaker so Nicole could land Ted reads less like benevolence and more like the kind of interpersonal engineering that keeps this universe functioning. People rarely end up together here. They are arranged, nudged, and cornered into it. And then there is the quietly hysterical paranoia of domestic control. If a spouse is constantly insisting on tea or Kool-Aid, always a drink, always administered, always framed as care, any sensible person starts thinking less about hydration and more about evidence. When comfort becomes a routine, vigilance becomes a necessity. If the series wants a unifying theme, it already has one. Secrets. Not tasteful secrets, not occasional secrets, industrial-grade secrecy distributed like a basic food group. Nearly every character is hiding something, and the show treats concealment as a civic duty. Randy Lawson is quietly juggling a secret family tie to Hayley Lawson, his cousin, and a con artist partnership with her and Lynette Wise, while also maintaining a separate covert loyalty as Doug McBride's best friend, shielding him from Joey Armstrong's reach. Hayley, for her part, carries enough deception to stalk an entire season. She secretly witnessed Bill kissing Danny, a betrayal that catalyzed her attempted murder of Bill. She faked a miscarriage and redirected blame toward Danny. And, in the neatest bit of moral incoherence, she secretly loves Bill despite trying to eliminate him. Vanessa McBride is hiding criminal activity from her daughters, maintaining a secret affair with Joey Armstrong, and possibly holding hidden knowledge, or at least suspicion, about Joey's role in Doug's death, using it as leverage while simultaneously unraveling in plain sight. Joey Armstrong's secrets are less shocking and more felony. The killing of Doug McBride, the affair with Vanessa, and a portfolio of corrupt dealings that suggests crime is not a lapse, but a business model. Vernon Dupree sits at the center of the rot with a polished smile and dirty hands. He helped cover up Martin's crime, turning violence into institutional corruption, while also engaging in secret meetings with Sharon that might be innocent, singing lessons perhaps, but look conveniently like an affair, which is either unfortunate or impeccably timed. Naomi Hamilton Hawthorne is hiding her desire to divorce Jacob, rooted in conflict over children, as well as the medical truth behind her not pregnant result, because nothing says marital stability like selective disclosure. Jacob Hawthorne is concealing what he knows about his father Elon and Malone's corruption, with the added pressure of intimidation keeping him silent. Kat Richardson's secret is not romance. It is strategy, a hidden motive for staying with Tomas as a tool of revenge against Eva, and a deeper reluctance to commit that reads like distrust disguised as prudence. Danny Dupree is hiding the fact that Bill kissed her twice from her husband Andre, likely because the past is not as past as it claims. Ashley Morgan is hiding her true feelings for Andre Richardson while proposing to Derek out of duty, guilt, or denial. Choose any combination. Martin Richardson's past includes homicide and a cover-up with his grandfather Vernon, because legacy in this family is apparently measured in buried bodies. Derek Baldwin is faking paralysis or injury to manipulate Ashley, proving deception is not merely emotional here, it is theatrical. Bill Hamilton is embedded in police corruption and the cover-up of Martin's crime, with shady activities functioning as his default setting. Ted Richardson carries a secret past tied to Eva'S arrival and the Martin-Vernon cover-up, ensuring that every new face is also a new trigger. Marcel Malone plays his own game with hidden agenda and flirtation, particularly with Leslie Thomas, under the convenient cover of investigation. Elon Hawthorne is implicated in the same cover-up network Vernon leveraged, and Anita Dupree is hiding the truth about the Articulatesi's founding, namely that she was not the true founder. Lynette Wise is secretly running cons with Randy and Hayley to defraud Bill, and Caroline is secretly in love with Bill Hamilton, because even when the show refuses suspense, it never refuses romantic complication. The irony is that the ingredients for gripping television are all present: betrayal, manipulation, cover-ups, coerced silence, fake injuries, strategic pregnancies, and a corruption network with enough connective tissue to hold the whole cast hostage. The only missing element is the will to stop circling and start detonating. The secrets are plentiful. The suspense is optional. That is not a tragedy. It is simply a choice, made repeatedly with remarkable consistency. This isn't a plot twist. It's lazy networking disguised as drama. Bill's new client just happens to know Hayley. The latest plot twist arrives with all the subtlety of a marching band. Bill's new client happens to know Hayley. Convenient. Almost as if the narrative has decided that coincidence is a perfectly acceptable substitute for momentum. At some point, the story needs to stop scavenger hunting through its own cast connections and start doing the radical thing called finishing an arc. Closing out a few dangling threads and introducing genuinely new ones would be less shocking and more competent, which might be a welcome change. Meanwhile, Thomas and Ashley continue to occupy the peculiar storytelling space reserved for characters who seem contractually obligated to appear, but narratively obligated to go nowhere. If the intention is to keep them in permanent stasis, pairing them together would at least consolidate the boredom into one contained area. Efficient television that makes it easier to fast forward without missing anything of value. On the shake things up front, Lynette has arrived as the designated disruptor, though the more pressing question is what exactly this person is disrupting besides the audience's patience. And if this is Lynette Dominy from the Country Wayne skits, then the show is either leaning into stunt casting or inviting viewers to play a game of "Where have you seen this face before?" instead of, again, telling a story. Kat, for all the noise and bravado, is revealing the classic hallmark of performative confidence: deep insecurity wrapped in loud packaging. It is the kind of characterization that can be compelling when the writing treats it as an intentional contradiction rather than an accidental one. Bill's behavior also reads less like straightforward recovery and more like calculated performance, as though a trap is being set to catch Hayley in the act. Which raises the obvious logistical question the show is dangling like a shiny object. How does Hayley know Lynette? And how does Lynette know Hayley? If the answer is simply because the plot demanded it, that is not mystery. That is administrative paperwork. Then there is the medical intrigue, which flirts with thriller logic while ignoring basic reality. The notion of an untraceable substance belongs to wishful thinking, not science. An idea that sounds dramatic until it collides with the inconvenient existence of toxicology and modern forensics. A far more plausible thread sits in the paperwork. Madison having access to Bill's original medical records, noticing something off when a man with multiple strokes suddenly receives a pristine bill of health. If the records were switched, Bill's swapped with Anita's, then the story finally has something resembling a grounded conspiracy rather than a fantasy poison. The only remaining question is whether the show intends to follow that sharper path or retreat back into the comfort of coincidence and convenient ignorance. As for ratings and viewing habits, does watching on Paramount Plus versus live network airtime affect the show's numbers? That depends on how the platform reports and how the network weights same-day viewing versus streaming and delayed metrics. The short version is that it can matter, but if the writing continues to rely on contrivances instead of conclusions, the more relevant metric may be how quickly viewers learn to use the fast-forward button.